The early morning sun cast soft rays through the stained glass windows of St. Matthew's Church, where Father Elijah Fisher began his homily in Willowbrook. As he spoke, a scruffy dog trotted boldly down the aisle, drawing curious murmurs from the congregation. No one could coax it away. The dog had come with purpose, an intensity in its eyes that unnerved even Father Elijah. Intrigued, he left the pulpit and approached the animal, feeling a strange pull he couldn't explain. To everyone's surprise, the dog brushed against his leg as if seeking trust, and Elijah placed a calm hand on its head. At that moment, the dog turned toward the door, pausing only to look back, as though inviting Elijah to follow. He felt compelled, almost as if drawn by something beyond himself. "Take a moment of silent prayer," Elijah instructed, hoping his departure wouldn't raise questions. He followed the dog outside, down a winding path toward the old cemetery at the edge of the church grounds. This place hadn't been used for years, as Willowbrook residents preferred the newer graveyard down the road. The land here was overgrown, blanketed in dense shadows cast by towering oaks. Father Elijah's footsteps crunched on the gravel as he followed, his heart racing with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The dog led him to a weathered grave, moss covering its inscription. Elijah squatted down, brushing away the dirt, and revealed the faint name, Martha R. Allen. It stirred faint memories, whispers he'd heard of a family long ago connected to a tragedy in Willowbrook. The dog sat silently by the grave, its gaze filled with an almost human sadness, as if waiting for Elijah to understand something deeper. He felt a chill run through him. Could this dog truly be some kind of messenger? Glancing around, Elijah found a small shovel nearby and, with cautious reverence, began to dig near the grave. The shovel struck something solid after a few minutes. Pulling it up, he found a rusted metal box. He hesitated, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. Inside the box, he found a faded photo of a young woman with a solemn expression, as though bearing a great burden. Beside it, a ring with a dull gemstone lay nestled in the fabric. Elijah held the items in silence, questions swirling in his mind. Who was this woman, and why had he been led here? Before he could process it fully, he glanced up to find the dog still there, its gaze steady and resolute. Elijah, feeling shaken, reburied the box carefully, sensing a respect for the unknown woman resting beneath the ground. With a final glance at the grave, he stood up. The dog rose, seemingly relieved, and began walking back toward the church. Elijah followed, pondering the strange encounter and the mysteries now unraveling in his mind, knowing that his questions had only just begun. The next morning, Father Elijah woke early, his mind troubled by the memory of the dog and the graveyard discovery. The image of the solemn woman in the photograph lingered, stirring something he couldn't quite place. After Mass, Elijah shared the story with Maggie Callahan, the church's young assistant who loved local history. Sitting in his office, he recounted every detail of the strange encounter. Maggie listened, eyes wide. "Do you think Martha R. Allen has some tragic link to Willowbrook's past?" she asked. Elijah nodded. "I've heard her name mentioned, maybe connected to a family tragedy, but it's all a bit foggy." While with Elijah's approval, Maggie set off to the town's historical society, a quiet building filled with aging records and faded photographs. Hours later, Maggie returned to the church, clutching a dusty folder labeled Allen Family, 1937. Her face was somber as she unfolded yellowed papers in front of Elijah. "Her story's tragic, Father," Maggie began. "Martha's family moved here during the Depression. Her parents died young, leaving her to raise her younger brother, Robert. Then he vanished under strange circumstances. People started to believe they were cursed." Maggie shrugged, then hesitated, looking thoughtful. Maybe the dog's some kind of spirit connected to her story. Together, they followed the dog out into the early evening light. The dog led them back to the cemetery, stopping at Martha's grave. Maggie knelt down, brushing her fingers over the rough stone. "There must be something we're overlooking," she whispered. Elijah scanned the nearby graves, noticing another headstone just a few feet away. Clearing the leaves, he uncovered a second name, Robert J. Allen. Elijah and Maggie walked back in quiet awe, realizing they had uncovered something far beyond the ordinary, something that wouldn't let them forget. As dawn broke over Willowbrook, Father Elijah felt haunted by the events of the past few days. The somber woman in the photograph, the tragic story of Martha and Robert, all these images clung to him. It was as if their spirits lingered, urging him forward, and he knew there was more left to uncover. Heading to the church early, he carried these questions heavily on his mind, a sense of unfinished business pressing down on him. Maggie was already waiting, sitting on the church steps with her notebook in hand. Her eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion, and yet there was a determined fire in them. "Father," she greeted him, her voice quiet yet strong. "I couldn't sleep. This feels unfinished. There has to be more to this story, something we've overlooked." The forest seemed to close in around them, the silence growing thick and heavy, broken only by the rustle of leaves beneath their feet. Maggie walked with her notebook held close, her usual spark of curiosity now mingled with an unmistakable unease. Elijah could feel it too. A chill, a sense of stepping into a past filled with secrets. The path twisted and turned, taking them deeper than Elijah had ventured before. Finally, they emerged into a small clearing, where the first rays of morning light filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across a cluster of half-buried stones, partially hidden under moss and tangled roots. The dog stopped beside one of these stones and began pawing at the earth, uncovering a thin, weathered marker. Elijah knelt down, brushing away the dirt to reveal initials faintly carved into the stone. R.A. His breath caught. "This must be Robert Allen's marker," he murmured, a chill running through him as he traced the letters. He glanced up at Maggie, whose face had gone pale. "Why bury him here, so far from his family?" she whispered. The dog's gaze was intense, as if carrying 1,000 unspoken words, each one steeped in pain and memory. Elijah sensed they were gazing into a painful, hidden past, a history that had left scars both seen and unseen. Maybe the townspeople wanted him forgotten, separated from the family plot, as though hiding him away could erase his memory, he said, his voice hushed. Maggie took out her notebook, flipping through clippings she had brought. "Father," she said slowly, "I read rumors that Robert had dark practices. People in town said he had a curse about him, that he'd brought misfortune on his family. But it was gossip, only ever spoken in whispers. If they truly believed he was cursed, maybe they wanted to bury him out here, hoping to sever his connection, to keep his influence away from the town." Elijah and Maggie realized then that this dog, acting as a silent guardian of forgotten graves, had led them here not in anger, but as a guide, a gentle urging to remember those whom the town had tried to erase. Elijah took a step back, feeling the weight of the revelation. "We can't let this story disappear again. Martha and Robert deserve to be remembered, even if the truth is painful." But it was gone, as if it had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a faint sense of its presence, a silent reassurance that its duty was fulfilled. Elijah felt a strange peace settle over him, as though the story had finally come to rest, and those tied to it could now find peace too. Maggie and Elijah walked back through the forest in silence, their steps heavy with the weight of history. They knew they had touched something beyond the ordinary, a story long buried and now finally brought to light, and yet it felt as though a quiet sense of closure had taken root, settling like the final line of a long-forgotten song.